Hello there. Well, I'm in Bridgeness, and you know, it's here in Scotland's close that you perhaps get a feel for what Bridgeness was once like. Like all villages, towns and cities, it's changed over the years, developed in a particular way. I suppose the street layout's probably quite similar to what it was hundreds of years ago, although streets will have gone and new avenues created. Used to be a lot of kind of vennels and little kind of narrow wines and things, and many of those will have gone over the years. The town still has a nice old feel to it, but as I say, I think it is really just here that you can perhaps get a bit of a hint as to what it was once like. Bridgeness was at one time a major port. I think it was second only to Leith as far as kind of the size of the port was concerned. Where you get a port, you often get a lot of industry, business, keen to make use of that transportation route to export their wares. I mean, Bridgeness had any number of industries, the huge coal pit at Kinneil, major iron foundry out that way as well, distillery, timber yards, potteries, chemical works, any number of industries that you can think of. A lot of those have gone. I was going to say most, but you know, it's rather encouraging to realise that here in Bridgeness they still have certain industries that they had hundreds of years ago. There are still, you still have Ballantyne's iron foundry on an iron foundry site that was there a long time ago, and you still have timber yards. I noticed them when I was coming through in the bus, number of timber yards, so all is not lost. My old blue guide to Scotland had this to say about Bridgeness: a little industrial town. Says it all.
Because you're standing there, it's very wary.
I know the feeling.
I was coming up there and I go, what are you doing that for? It's because you're standing there and it's something, it's no seen. Telling him to smile, else I won't get his photo taken. Small dog thing. Wee dog with a big voice.
Yeah.
Small dogs aside, Bridgeness is a nice place to wander around, even in winter outside of the tourist season. It's always nice wandering by a huge stretch of water. Before we had good roads like we have now, feel free to laugh out loud, rivers, canals and seas provided a major route for the transportation of people and goods. Bridgeness sits by the wide Firth of Forth and has been a port for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The Antonine Wall, built by the Romans across central Scotland from the River Clyde to the River Forth in the 2nd century AD, and once known as Graham's Dyke, ended at Bridgeness, now part of Bridgeness, and it's highly probable that the Romans had a port close by. Before the town built its harbour in the early 18th century, ships used a long promontory, or NESS, that extended from the shore way into the River Forth to load and unload goods. A map of 1630 clearly shows that NESS, a bit sticking out from the mainland. Another map dating to 1684 shows lots of tall-masted ships waiting just offshore. The town had been recognised as a port from 1565 and officially recognised in 1601. But it was this waiting and delay in being able to offload or pick up cargo that necessitated the building of a proper stone harbour. Daniel Defoe, author of Robinson Crusoe, travel writer and spy, visited the area in the 1720s and noted that the harbour at Bo'ness had more ships than Leith. So perhaps Bo'ness was actually the largest, and not the second largest, port in Scotland, at least for a while. Examination of old maps can tell us a number of things. We can see that Bo'ness was once called Borrowstounness, until being hit by the worldwide shortage of letters that occurred in 1652. We can also see the many industries in the area, everything from the huge coal mine and ironworks below Kinneil to the distillery, timber yards, etc. The harbour was clearly added to and improved as the years went by, with the addition of a new dock, a timber basin for the storage of imported logs and pit props, and rail lines to move coal and timber and other products. Timber imports were so important to Bo'ness in the late 19th and early 20th centuries with regard to the manufacture of pit props for the coal mining industry that the town came to be known as Pitpropolis. But sadly, times change, and perhaps as a result of industrial decline, Bo'ness Harbour and dock closed in 1959. It was felt at the time that the dock had been deliberately neglected and run down so as to prove it was no longer viable. Some people even used the word sabotage. For this little industrial town, it was a major blow.
Of course, things do change. One of the videos I made about 6 years ago was of a walk between Bo'ness and Linlithgow. And I had a little bit of a look at Bo'ness at that time, and I bought my pie. We did a pie on a walk. I bought my pie in Oliphant's the Bakers here in Bo'ness. At that time they had two branches, one in Bo'ness, one in Linlithgow. The Bo'ness branch used to be just behind me. Unfortunately, Oliphant's the Bakers has ceased to exist. The branch just behind me, it looks as if it's a fruit shop now. Good to see the shop still in use, but a bit of a shame that Oliphant's has gone. As I say, things do change over time. And I think what we'll do today is I'm just going to have a wander around the streets of Bo'ness. Have a look at one or two old photographs and maybe try to compare the old with the new. Initially, let's just head up to the top of the town, up one of the steep kind of braes towards the old town hall, where we'll get good views down onto Bo'ness, and we'll take it from there. well, I think I'm in silhouette, but what the heck, sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles. This is a viewpoint. I come uphill a little bit just beside the town hall's just behind the camera there. You got a wonderful view of the River Forth and across the River Forth. It's stunning stuff. And of course, when you do gain a bit of height and you look down on a place, you're just getting a general view. You're not really getting the full picture. It's almost like a whitewashed view for all the details that you don't want talked about or swept to one side, and it just all looks lovely. In the past, photographers would have come up to spots like this and gained a bit of height and taken shots looking down into Borrowstounness. And the difference between their old photographs and my video footage is that when you look down at Borrowstounness, you can see the masts of sailing ships in the harbour. And there's no ships in the harbour these days. There's no huge coal mine. There are still industries, as I perhaps touched on earlier. But I think it's now time to maybe have a brief look at some parts of old Borrowstounness and how today things have changed.
In this photograph dating to around 1900, we can see those sailing ships in the harbour. The clock tower on the left was built in the 1880s to replace an earlier tower once attached to the old town hall. We can see that clock tower in this photo dating to the 1950s, along with the Douglas Hotel on the right and the bank building sneaking into shot in the far left. This is how it looks today, with the tower demolished in the 1960s and most of that site now the bus station. The bank building is still with us, along with the building that used to sit on the left of the tower, once the offices of the co-op. In another photo allegedly dating to around 1910, but clearly earlier and probably dating to around the mid-1880s, we see a similar view looking east along North Street. But the tower is not there. Clearly this was before the replacement tower was built. The first edition Ordnance Survey map of 1855 reveals the exact location of the old town hall or townhouse, which was behind where the new tower would be built and slap bang in the middle of what is now the bus station. The map also shows St John's Well, the early 19th century forerunner to the Jubilee drinking fountain built in 1887. The same photo also shows the old well, and at the end of the street we see Dimmock's building by Scotland's Close, clearly visible in the same view today. If we head along Market Street, a fairly recent thoroughfare created in 1903, and head into South Street, we find Christmas lights put up in a street lined with buildings of various age, but still lacking that quaint higgledy-piggledy charm of the old town. And here's the same view around 1890, with a jumble of structures and an external stair. The old Borrowstounness. The surprising thing about this photo is that practically all of the buildings on the right-hand side of South Street are still standing today. Count the windows on the first floor of each building and you'll see what I mean. Buildings lining the other side of the street are a mix of modern and 1930s construction. Here we see dock workers in the 1890s, clearly involved in the moving of timber between ship and shore. And in later years, it's still timber. In some timber yards, the workmen look a bit on the young side, and they weren't all men. Here we see workers in John Denholm's timber yard in 1909. For an industry whose dangers were well documented, it's more than a tad surprising to see young boys, nay children, employed. Losing fingers and whole hands with circular saws was not unknown. In 1907, Margaret McIntosh, who was just 14 years old, was killed in Love Stewart and Company's wood yard in Bo'ness when a stack of wooden props collapsed on top of her and another young woman. The young women who worked in these timber yards appeared to dress strangely. This 1920s photo shows 4 sawmill workers at Bo'ness. Their attire is colourful, but sometimes practical and sometimes not. There's no steel toe-cap boots there. But it is their headscarves or shawls that look unusual. The shawls look thicker than normal shawls, and it is likely that they were used to protect their head when carrying props and other lengths of wood. And it's nice to see that today, as touched on earlier, Bo'ness still has timber yards. Further inland from the sawmills on the shore, we have the roundabout at the foot of Church Wynd and a view along Seaview Place towards the town centre. A branch of the Clydesdale Bank used to sit in the corner. The small white building in the middle used to be a cinema called the Electric Theatre, while the building on its right was the Clydesdale Hotel. The hotel occupied all buildings towards the corner, although I am unsure if this was originally the case. The white building on the corner has been greatly footered with over the years, as we can see in this photo of around 1910 when it was a bar. Another old view from further up Church Wynd, also apparently dating to around 1910, and again showing the Clydesdale Hotel, although the corner building looks very different to how it looked in the previous photo, and has clearly been made taller and more regal, and definitely part of the hotel. This is the same view today. Apparently there used to be a quoiting green, or quoiting green, let me hear from the pronunciation monitors, behind the hotel. Here we see it again around 1910. Judging by the number of people looking on, this was a pretty major event. You don't see much quoiting in Scotland these days, or even kiting. Seemingly it was once popular among miners, happy to be free from the underground. For a while I struggled to know where the quoiting green was. You can clearly see the cupolas on the town hall at the top of the hill, and 2 buildings at the top of Providence Lane, which still exist today. Given that it was seemingly behind the hotel, I reckon that is probably it right there. We have miners to thank for one of the main annual events in Bo'ness, the Bo'ness Fair. The previous photo in Church Wynd was taken during one of those fairs. Flags are fluttering and people are having fun. Bo'ness has had a fair in June or July every year since the late 18th century. In its early days, it was something of a drunken orgy among miners who were celebrating their freedom from being tied to a particular coal mine. Ever since those early heady days, the fair has grown in popularity, become less of a drunken orgy and more of an organised, colourful spectacle involving children, brass bands and all sections of the local populace. But it wasn't just that annual fair. Bo'ness likes its fairs, pageants and processions. Any excuse for an ease-up, which is hardly surprising as the town sits to the north of higher ground and so probably gets less sun than other places, especially in winter. Which is a good reason to sometimes feel a little bit glum.
Well, I thought I'd just end here by the shore, overlooking these massive expanse of mudflats that I suspect in past centuries they've thought about filling in and reclaiming some land, or just make the land go out further, taking over a bit of the water. And in some areas I suspect that's exactly what they've done. But not here. This is probably just Christmas is next week, and you know, while a lot of Bo'ness's industries have gone, there are, as I've already said, still some industries left, but the town is mainly, I think, a tourist town now. You've got the magnificent railway line running along towards Kinneil and what have you, and you've got the National Railway Museum. These attractions aren't open in the winter, but like so many places, that doesn't mean that you can't visit towns like Bo'ness, because it's just a joy to wander around these places and have a look at some of the old stuff that's left, and just the way these towns are. Every town develops in a unique way. And while it's been an absolutely bitter morning, the slight wind would have cut right through you, it's so cold. I've enjoyed wandering around. Just next week, the days will start getting longer, and we can look forward to another year. We can all get out and about. Hallelujah! I'm Eddie Burns. Bye for now.